Welcome. This will be a completely spoiler-free review of Amy's Dead-End Dreamhouse. I'm basing this on Season 1, which is 6 episodes. That's all that is out now. I am not entirely sure if we are getting more or not. If we do, and I have much more to say, then I will at least strongly consider making another video talking about that. I have made videos on all the episodes, and the link to the description box will be linked in the description box. There is a link in the description box to a playlist that has all of those videos. The show is rated TVMA, so this video B, and this is a show that I absolutely fucking love, which is probably not a surprise to many of you. I mean, for one thing, I've done videos talking about the individual episodes, talking about how much I love them, but also this is a show that acknowledges and at least slightly explores the existential dread that it must be to live as an anthropomorphized version, or yeah, a, I forget if, does that mean that it has like more of a physical, if something that is usually not sentient were granted sentience. And I think I will just very briefly note, so the show is on Nebula, which, I personally have been very happy with that platform. I saved up and got the lifetime membership, and yeah, it's great to watch. Almost everything Lindsay Ellis does these days is Nebula exclusive, and there's also some really great stuff from others. Some that, yeah, I mean, I'm not, yeah, I'm getting sidetracked. Other than this show, some of the really big ones that I would also recommend are Dracula's Ex-Girlfriend and Jesse Gender's Identities. Now, the setup here is basically, it is a kids show for adults, and through, that is very carefully developed and considered. It's right there in the title. Dreamhouse makes us think of, like, I don't know, maybe like Barbie. I'm not sure there's a specific kid show that says Dreamhouse, but there it might more be like Treehouse. Was that what? Playhouse was Pee. Yeah, I think Pee Wee was Playhouse. Anyway, and as soon as you put the words "dead end" in front of Dreamhouse, then suddenly it's a house built on dead end dreams, which, if you didn't already guess, yes, the show is by, for, and about millennials. And yeah, they just do such a fantastic job with this core concept of, what if, um, traditional kids show was about the problems faced by adults who in some ways feel like they never grew up. And, yeah, we millennials are struggling with certain things that, you know, boomers either didn't or didn't to the same degree. And a number of millennials will use comfort media to try to escape from those problems. So, it's a very layered thing to make a piece of media that is sort of disguised as comfort media and reminds us of how the comfort media doesn't necessarily really solve these things. And yeah, it has the different elements of these kinds of kids shows. The titular Amy, the host protagonist, goes through problems, talks to other characters, including the living appliances in her home, and, sets up a problem that is relatable to a millennial at least, and, by the end of the episode, we'll have some sort of reflection on it. And there is a lot of kids show logic on the show, but because it is TVMA and, for adults in general and such, there'll often be this sort of warping of, so it's something where you're like, okay, if you had a TVMA kids show, that is what we would indeed see on that show. And the show does well at setup and payoff. The psychological accuracy, sometimes they'll play with that element. Sometimes characters will say or do things where it's like, that's not really how that works for a person, but there's always enough of it that it doesn't feel like they're just, nothing feels like it just comes completely out the blue. And the show stays very true to itself, and you can tell that it was made by people who grew up on these kids shows, and though they're not necessarily going to sit down and watch one that is for kids by themselves, unless it's like, oh, this is an episode I remember from childhood, they do have a lot of love for the medium still. And let's see, I guess this is a good place to talk about. So the format is also used quite well, because there are these fake ad breaks, and if you are familiar with Nebula, you already know they don't do ad breaks on there. One of a number of benefits of that platform. So instead we have these, fake ones that, like, it's not even like, oh, this is an ad for an actual product. No, they made up products and use them to, satirize various aspects of, for example, capitalism. And they just absolutely nail these. It is unreal how well they, even the bumpers are funny. And I think that does bring us nicely to, the level of detail is great. There's hinted at backstory, and there clearly is a world out there. It's just that, we maybe don't spend forever just going around it. Like, it's not that, there are, like, even in the first episode, Amy does leave the Dreamhouse, but it is not, there is a tendency to have stuff be in studio, which, for one thing, it works well just in general, but it is also, like, I remember a bunch of those kid shows having, they tended to prefer studio. I'm not saying all of them, but yeah. And the tone, it's one of those, it is primarily a comedy show, but every so often it will have something more serious and, like, genuine, and it, bounces between these kind of extremes, very well. Now, I think that does more or less, that brings us to the dialogue, which is written and delivered quite well. And, there are scenes of just characters talking about the episode's problem, or perhaps reflecting on one from an earlier episode. I thought they did a good job on the continuity here, that things do carry over. You're not going to want to watch episodes out of order. And every character has their own voice, their own problems, their own past, such. And yeah, just a ton of really, really funny lines delivered quite well. And I, yeah, there's a good amount of banter in part, like the fact that Amy has, more than one appliance that speaks, and so they can play off each other. And some of the episodes will feature a celebrity guest that will, I will admit most of them I did not know, but I understand that these are, you know, yeah, um, they are people that are important to a number of millennials that, I mean, for one thing, at least one of them is a member of the LGBTQ plus community, and while I try to be the best ally I can, I will admit there are a number of, you know, yeah, prominent members of the community that I am not personally familiar with. I guess this is a good time to briefly talk about, the show is very frank about issues faced by minority communities, and there's no real like judgmental tone. It is just, you know, trying to understand different people's perspectives and experiences and learn from them and be the best person you can be. And yeah, facing modern issues head on and appreciating that part of the solution comes through community. It's not about like, oh, this individual should completely on their own somehow figure out the solution and never need help. This is not a show that agrees with the toxic ideology that, oh, if you need anyone else, then you must be weak. It finds strength in community. I guess at this point I don't even have to say it's a pretty far left show. And yeah, I'm here for it. I really love that it's, at this point, much, much easier for me to find fellow far leftists than, when I was younger. And perhaps especially in like, or sorry, including this, media, not, yeah, these shows and such. Now, the direction is quite strong. Like there is a very firm grasp on the form. Like it genuinely does feel like, if you were watching sort of the adult version of one of these kids shows. And Amy is like a number of these kids shows would have a character that either was a child or like was sufficiently childish that a child would see them and be like, okay, I can relate to this. Amy, one of the first things we learn about her in the first episode, she has a non-zero number of jobs that she is not necessarily particularly happy with. And yeah, like it feels like what we are witnessing is essentially like Amy used to be a child and, started a channel, star of her own, kids show where she talked to other kids about her problems. But now she's grown up and she has different problems and she's trying to figure out, she still is the person she used to be. What does her new her look like? All these such confusing things about, you know, I'm not saying it's exclusive to millennials, but yeah, growing up today. And yeah, it works incredibly well. It's and let's see, I think that brings us nicely to, so yeah, the cinematography, you know, uh, at times it is just this, yeah, fairly straightforward filming, but they do also do much more dramatic angles, some of the time befitting this kind of kids show with the just ridiculous kind of, over the top stuff. And then other times it is, yeah, more of like a serious, yeah. And there are other things that I don't want to, yeah, because those would be spoilers. The editing is also really great. It's like they really managed to trim all of these episodes down to just, I don't know if that was in the editing room or while writing, but there's no fat on any of these. There's nothing that I would seriously make the case should just be bare minimum trimmed down, maybe even removed entirely. Everything adds up. And yeah, the with it being a comedy show, a lot of the jokes rely on the editing being spot on, and it always is. There's never a time where a joke fails because of the editing. Like, there are parts where something will go on for longer than you would initially think, and there are others where something is cut off very abruptly, and those are joke types that can be very difficult to get exactly right. If you get it just a little bit off, you know, you can really botch it, and once again, never happened on this. All 6 episodes are excellent. Each of them deals with one particular problem that millennials experience today. And, while they do talk about things that are, you know, fairly specific, it is the kind of thing of, I, as in many ways a member of the majority, never felt like I couldn't relate to the issues that, yeah. And yeah, each time it feels like they really sat down and thought about, okay, what do we want to make sure to say about this real life problem? What needs to be in this episode? And some of them are only briefly covered. I guess I did also briefly want to note, so the breaks, it's not always like ads. Sometimes there is one or two other things in there that just, yeah, really nail what they're going for. And I'm glad that I didn't know exactly what they were going to be, so I'm not going to give them away here. Now, the production value, set design, locations, costumes, and makeup are all fantastic. So we really get a sense of Amy from seeing her dream house, and the world that she inhabits from seeing other places, and her costume and that of other characters really nails that thing of, like, yeah, she looks like an overgrown child. She looks like someone who's reluctant to accept that she is now an adult. And yeah, the music, right from the ridiculously earwormy theme song, it just always fantastic. Getting that balance between, like, it sounds somewhat like something you would hear introducing one of these shows, but there's also just enough, like, if you look at the lyrics and some of the tone of what is being, and it's like, oh, this is not for kids. And the sound design is also really, really great. There are a number of jokes that really rely on that element. And the characters are sufficiently engaging. Like there was never a time where I was like, ugh, this fucking person again, you know. Throughout, we, you know, yeah, enjoy seeing various, you know, there's at least one cast member who makes more than one appearance, you know, as different characters, and through and through, it never feels like someone was given a role just because, like, oh, I guess they're friends with someone who worked on it and got it, even though they're not. Like, no, everyone is ideal for what they are given, for the role or roles that they play. And they manage also this thing of, so basically the appliances, it's not really a spoiler to say, you know, yeah, I'll very briefly go over, you know, you have TV, that's TEEVEE, the TV, which, like, yeah, right there you can see, okay, yeah, they watched these kids shows because that's the kind of naming of them, you know. Yeah, sentient television set, and she shows Amy things, and she's got this kind of mean girl thing that, you know, in part it's very clear it comes from some of aforementioned existential dread, and it's also one of those things where they're able to criticize mean girls without, like, implying that the fact that some girls are mean girls means that all girls and women are terrible or something. You know, the show specifically calls out misogyny and criticizes it. And I don't know if I need to say it, but yeah, you know, each time they criticize something, it's very clear they do 100% understand this actual issue that, yeah, which obviously makes it more compelling than watching, you know, magnets. How the fuck do they work? And I think that might be it for TV. We have, so at first I thought it was pronounced Quake, but it is apparently Quack the Snake, so it doesn't even rhyme. And, you know, immediately you can see, okay, they're struggling with the, oh shit, sorry, I went in the wrong order. I think Mike is yeah, Mike the Microwave is also one of the, you know, and yeah, it's basically Mike, you know, sentient microwave, commenting on how, you know, without, like, necessarily outright spelling out, but yeah, you know, Amy the millennial watches too much TV, eats too much stuff that goes through the microwave. There are times where he'll offer to microwave something and you're sitting there thinking, like, you probably shouldn't microwave that, though. That sounds like you're just in the habit of microwaving fucking everything you put in your body. That's not good. But yeah, Quack the Snake. So, you know, not an appliance. That's point one. But, you know, it like, you can, like, feel a, you know, a room of writers being like, listen, we need, like, I don't know what to tell you. The network is saying we have to come up with more sidekick characters, okay? I don't know. I guess I don't know what appliance we could do. Maybe she has a pet snake. I don't know, you know. And Quack has a past, which every so often we get glimpses into, which is fascinating. And yeah, I think that does lead us nicely into the one remaining is the Cinder Block, Cindy, who everyone seems to understand and even be able to hear speak, even though the audience 100% absolutely cannot. And the way they play this joke is just so perfect because there'll be like a close-up of Cindy and someone will react as though we, the audience, were supposed to have just heard Cindy speak. And the fact that we didn't, and that this happens more than once, like I'm not going to give away exactly how many times or whatever, but just, yeah, it's incredibly funny because like it does really call attention to like, it is really strange to have this thing of like, because once again, a lot of these kid shows will have, oh yeah, they'll talk to, it's not always like appliances, but it's something that in the real world doesn't talk, maybe doesn't even exist. And I, yeah, that brings us to, so I'm not familiar with most of the actors here. Maggie Mae Fish, who plays Amy, I have been following for some years now. I've watched everything she's put on YouTube, been a fan of her since the Cracked days, and yeah, like the moment that I first heard that she was making a show like this, I knew that I had to watch it at some point. And yeah, it's just such a perfect creation for her. Like you watch her video essays, certainly you should be, and it's like she really loves these creative things, creative outlet kind of, like I appreciate she's not the only video essayist to have like skits and such, but some of the ones who do, it feels like, okay, this is here because like there's an expectation that you have to include something like this, and I've never felt like that with her. She didn't have to dress up as a Broadway Cat's cat to review to yeah, discuss Cats, the musical, but she did, and it's just like so funny seeing her in that, costume and makeup, and then just acting like a regular cat, like knocking shit over. That's, yeah. And yeah, her voice really comes through here. She is not, merely, and I'm not saying that there would be something wrong with that, but she's not merely the actor. She helped develop this, and yeah, like you really, it's, if you've ever watched one of her YouTube videos and felt like Maggie Mae Fish seems like she would like to go further, but YouTube is telling her, nope, this is as far as you're going to be able to go if you want the algorithm to, heap blessings upon thee. This is what she, when there are not those limitations, this is what she makes. And yeah, it's just as amazing as I knew it would be from watching her other content. Her comedic timing is always on point. And yeah, if you watched her video essays, I don't even have to tell you, yeah, she does, like, as far as acting goes, yeah, she's good. She is, that's another thing where sometimes, and honestly, sometimes it's just funny and they get it. They realize it themselves. Some video essayists, they're not necessarily the best actors, but they're having fun, and so are we while watching it, But yeah, Maggie Mae Fish genuinely does a really, you know, great job. Everyone who acts in this is really, really great. And yeah, other than Maggie Mae Fish, I was also already familiar with Bill Corbett from MST3K and Riff Tracks. And yeah, like, he also nails the acting, the, the genuine moments are genuine moments. And yeah, he plays Mike. Now, I think that does get us nicely into, yeah, it's well paced. Like episodes are, you know, I think around 24 minutes before the end credits, and do either stay through or just skip to the very end once the end credits start rolling, because, you know, I guess I won't give away if it's all, but at least some of these episodes do have a bit at the very end that is, yeah, well worth, making sure you catch. But yeah, they move along very nicely. It never feels like they're taking too long to establish, develop, or conclude on an idea in an episode. And the special effects. So basically, there is a different animation style, or animation style and or puppeteering type for each of the appliances. So Mike is done in stop motion, mouth and eyes with a good level of expression. And in case you were wondering, yes, when he talks, the what are those called in English again? Danish here. The microwave door, opens and closes for him speaking. TV is 2D animation. It'll play back her face is on the screen. And she looks like an old-timey kind of mascot character or something. Like if TV, appeared next to, Mickey Mouse of Steamboat Willie, or I guess, was he called Willie back then? You wouldn't bat an eye. Quack is a felt puppet, puppeteered with the I actually don't know what those, I don't know what the exact method is called, but it's that kind of thing of like, there's someone hiding behind, Quack has a tendency to be right behind or maybe on the couch, and obviously there is a puppeteer behind the couch with a couple of rods, and that's how we're getting, movement there. And other than that, there are some other, there is like visual effect kind of stuff. They never try to do something that they can't make look good, and everything is filtered through, the kind of show that it is satirizing. And yeah, I think that does bring us nicely to, there is high quality and variety of jokes, and delivery is really great. I'm not sure there was any joke that I just thought was not funny, and it's very rare to have this kind of batting average, like very, very impressive. And it's not unlike something like Hot Fuzz. You never know exactly what kind of joke you're going to get as the very next one. There are very few, if any, real limitations here. Like, I would say, it never like kicks down real. See, that's the thing. I have to be careful here because technically, there are communities discussed that I'm not a member of. Certainly, I think if it ever does kick down, they are very careful to make it clear that they're not actually saying, oh, look at this terrible thing. They're just having some fun with a thing they're familiar with. And it is not like, there is a very distinct, sense of empathy and sympathy throughout. It is very much a show that wants to understand problems so that they can be solved. But outside of that, like, the very next thing, it might be, just this goofy little innocent joke that genuinely you might see on a kid show, or it might be the single most fucked up thing that you've seen and or heard in a while. And a lot of leeway in between as well. Yeah, I think that does pretty much. Yeah, it's also, it is TVMA, but it does not feel like it needs, it doesn't feel a need to, like, just be gratuitous with anything. If it doesn't really serve what they're going for, the joke, the theme, the, plot, or, what have you, yeah, they're not gonna do it just because. Like, yeah, sometimes there is, for example, swearing, but it's not just, you know, I should probably think of a different example, but my go-to remains Max Payne 2. I know, maybe somebody else remembers this over 20-year-old game. That was a case where they were clearly allowed to say fuck, and so they had no restraint. It feels like, parts of that game were written by a 13-year-old. You know, there's yeah, like one of the early lines is someone saying fuck twice within like maybe 7 seconds or something, and it's like, okay, we get it. Like, you're at a 10. I need you to be at a 2. Like, calm down. We get it. You can swear now. And yeah, this show never feels like, I don't personally think that there's something inherently wrong, like morally or ethically, with a lot of swearing. But after a while, it's gonna have kind of a numbing effect. It's just not, you know, it's not particularly interesting. Like, I think if you're gonna have a character swear a lot, it should communicate something, like maybe they're panicking, for example. And I'm very fond of swearing used to denote, okay, this person is now, doesn't have to be upset, but maybe just passionate, and yeah, I thought this show did well at that. And I think that does pretty much cover, yeah, um, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I should note, some people seem to think that we on the far left, like, hate certain groups of, like, hate members of the majority just for being members of the majority, which is a misunderstanding of the fact that we try to criticize tendencies and behavior, which are things you can change. You cannot change, like, yeah, if you're, like, once again, I am in most ways a member of the majority. Those are things about myself that I can't change. I've never actually personally encountered, I don't know, it's possible they're out there, but I've never personally encountered anyone on the far left who tried to make me feel bad about being born like that. There's just, a number of them who will say, okay, but, since you're a member of them, try to check your white, straight, male privilege, things like that. And yeah, that's not the same thing as being bigoted towards someone. But, in case you need to hear it, no, this show really doesn't feel like it hates members of the majority. It just, criticizes, for example, misogyny. But it's not saying that, cis het white men are just inherently terrible and impossible to, you know, it's, that they will never, we will never be able to, actually be ethical and support those who need. I don't think I've made a video recommendation yet, so I am just real quick going to, let's see. Oh, did I not? I know I have at least one. Yes, here we go. Yeah. Illuminati Pop made a video called Why Everyone Got Petrovsky Wrong, Sex and the City, and it is fantastic, as her videos tend to be. Yeah, I think that covers it. So yeah, in closing, I just want to say whether or not we get more, I want Maggie May Fish and the rest of the creative team here to make what they most feel like making. And if it's another season, I am definitely going to watch it. If it's something else entirely, if it goes to a service that I have, I am definitely going to be interested in it. And yeah, like I appreciate that the way they end this first season, you don't need more. Like if we genuinely don't get any more, then that's perfectly fine. They don't end on a cliffhanger. It's not this kind of thing where it's like unsatisfying or something, but it also doesn't like close the door. Like they could easily make more if they really wanted to without like breaking continuity or something. And yeah, I'm really, really glad that they made like not even one of these episodes feel like they ran out of steam and were just like, okay, let's just get this out then. It always feels like, okay, they really, really wanted to make this, and they delivered something that lived up to what they were hoping for. And yeah, like it's the kind of thing where it sucks when you are when you end up just having to force something out that you end up not being super happy with. And yeah, I think that does cover the yeah, and it's probably a good place to end the video then, in part also because I don't know, I have this thing where if I talk about something on Nebula for a long enough time in a row, then I end up talking about how some of the things that I've heard people criticize about Nebula don't seem to make any sense to me. Like I'm not saying that it's impossible to come up with a coherent criticism of Nebula, but I do remember seeing one where it was like, I'm not going to mention who, but someone who was on Nebula for a while, left Nebula, and it was apparently because they had said something. I'm not sure if it was in a Nebula video or on another platform, but somewhere online they had said something that went against Nebula's values, and so the Nebula leadership had a conversation with them, and they have the YouTuber has since expressed look, it was we parted on good terms, and then I saw someone comment like, this is the thing about something like Nebula, if you bring someone on and they do something that you don't like, how are you going to get them back off Nebula? And I'm just wondering, what the actual fuck are you talking about? Because, like, that's not what happened here. They didn't struggle to get rid of the person. They wanted the person off Nebula. They had a conversation with them. Like, I've not heard anything that's would imply that there was any problem removing this person from the platform at all. So no, like, they had a solution, they carried it out, and it worked. And sometimes you'll come across people online who just want to complain about things even when something worked exactly the way that it should. Like, if anything, think about how many people are right here on YouTube that have violated TOS, that have said and done things that there really should be like deplatforming levels of consequences for, but they're still around because, I don't know, I mean, YouTube, it's the algorithm, if they draw in enough views, they're going to get a ridiculous amount of leeway, and that's not at all something The nebula has, yeah. See what I mean? I rate this show 8 trips to the dead-end dream house full of colorful characters and a wonderful mix of maturity and immaturity in dealing with real-life problems out of 10.